Hello and welcome to the ReCommerce podcast, the podcast where we talk all things ReCommerce and circular businesses. I'm joined by Tuomo Laine, the CEO and co-founder of Twice Commerce. Hello.
Hey.
Today we're going to talk about refurbishment flows. So basically what happens when the company that is operating in some kind of ReCommerce business actually receive the product, what happens to the product before it's ready for the next cycle. So these type of refurbishment flows are relevant for resale businesses, rental businesses, or basically anyone that is refurbishing the item between the cycles. But yeah, let's jump into the refurbishment flow. We have an example here, and it starts by receiving the product.
Yeah. So if we look at the refurbishment flow, so kind of like you said, everything that happens between you getting back a product and then putting it into a condition where it could go out again as a part of a resale or maybe a rental or whatever. So it all starts with the receiving of the product. So we could say it starts with the idea of let's identify what is this. It differs a bit on per product category. So in some categories, you might always get like an individual product packaged into individual box. So let's imagine that you're getting back we've used phones as an example many times, but let's imagine that from a consumer I get a single phone. So there might be a declaration of what is inside, like the consumer created a declaration of what's in the box. So from that perspective, we kind of quite quickly get to a place where we just try to kind of identify the condition and maybe assign it a license plate number or a unique identifier to kind of follow it as part of the process. But there's cases like with clothes where instead of getting a single item per box, you might get a truck full of clothes from all of your product returns from various different stores. And they're kind of dumped to the refurbishment center as just a pile of clothes. So there, the initial kind of receiving starts with the idea that let's separate these, let's maybe tag them, if necessary, let's kind of give them the license plate number or the identifier, and then we start to sort them out. And the sorting of these, then again, super dependent on the product category, but then we start to kind of figure out where might these go on an initial level. But yeah, maybe that's the main thing about receiving it, that it might be receiving a single item, or it might be receiving a bunch of like a pile of items that we need to start sorting out. So I think that's the two things and that is connected there. And yeah, maybe one more that I want to add, that if it's that pile of clothes, you probably don't have like a declaration for each one of those. So you might have an understanding that from what brand or what store or what category of like clothes this might be, for example, and on average what the condition is. But yeah, that's the main kind of worries and concerns when receiving stuff.
Maybe quick discussion about the LPN, the license plate number.
Yeah.
So to my understanding, if for example iPhones, they already have some kind of unique identifier. So
Yeah.
that's probably something that you want to use if you're able to kind of get it out of the product. But then if it's, let's say, pile of clothes, it's still important, or is it still important to kind of start tracking them individually from that point on? So are you putting like a label that this is a red dress from Gucci, or is this the specific red dress from Gucci?
Yeah, super dependent on the refurbishment capabilities there, but the earlier you're able to track items individually, the better you're able to track your operational efficiency, your profitability, and all of the data that it starts to be attached to that. So getting from an aggregate data accumulation to an individual data accumulation enables you just to learn a bit more. So like you said, something like phones might have a like EMA code, and you might still want to use something specific for your system, because if you've done a lot of automation in your processes, some of those might depend on a specific format, for example, for the license plate number or the unique identifier. You might also have things like automated tracking based on RFIDs. So if you attach an RFID tag to a piece of item or clothes, then your system might be intelligent enough to automatically know where is it currently going on. So in clothing, in Glasgow, there's a company called ACS Clothing. They've done, if you ever have a chance to visit their facility, I think that's an eye-opener in terms of how to follow individual garments and the different steps in the process that happens after that, and automatically kind of knowing where everything is. I haven't had the chance to visit their facility, but there's a company called JC Electronics that I met at Brussels during World Circular Economy Forum. They do electronics refurbishment for like manufacturing plants. They also have larger facilities, and I can imagine that they, for example, for a component of that size for a manufacturing device, they might have some needs to follow these individually already quite from early point in the process.
So the LPN, the license plate number, can be in, let's say, RFID or QR code or basically anything that helps the operation to handle.
Exactly, and maybe worthwhile to say that I think systems like how we think about it and how we're building our system is that a item can actually have multiple license plate numbers. So you don't have to kind of try to figure out like I have this one and now everything needs to kind of follow this one. At the end of the day, you get attached like even 100 different unique identifiers to that. As long as they are in their own little scope, they are unique. So it doesn't have to be one single kind of namespace that you use for it. But as long as you kind of have a process where you might have the options to start tagging or minting, or I've heard different verbs being used for this. License plate number, I think, is quite understandable. Identification is one, and then like minting and tagging and all of these things. I want to also, by the way, mention for the license plate stuff that at best case, you don't actually have to mint them yourself. Manufacturers are in increasing numbers already doing this tagging or minting already at manufacturing. So that all of the supply line after that can always kind of use that one source of identification. Just wanted to put it out there quickly because it makes all of these later processes a lot easier.
Is that based on regulation, or why are some companies starting to do that?
I think there's few things. There is regulation for that. I think digital product passport in European Union is kind of pushing towards that world. But there's also in certain, like you already said, that iPhones kind of have that, or kind of phones have that unique identifier. So there might be some other needs from the manufacturer's perspective that why they've wanted to have every iPhone to be uniquely trackable. Then with there are like with sporting goods, the relationship with the manufacturers are such that they might, for example, have a specific product line for rentals. And of course, they want to serve their customers, which in this case usually are rental companies, as well as they can. So companies like Atomic and Fisher are already kind of identifying those, attaching extremely durable QR codes or barcodes to the ski, for example, pair of skis, so that are matched, so that it makes the job of the rental company easier when they want to put these items to their own system and use the kind of manufacturer grade, more durable, kind of usually engraved barcodes there. And they even go to a place where they have these matching barcodes between the two skis, and then they might have individual barcodes for each one of those skis, so that you can later on repair things if you want. Not repair, but repair. Yeah.
All right. So the first phase was to get the license plate number on the item, or ideally it's already in the item and maybe it's already put into the system. And then the first step, I guess, is this type of general sortation or similar.
Yeah, so in that sortation, we try to do those high-level decisions on, for example, which process line this item goes. So in many cases, if you are a professional refurbisher, you might have established relationships with brands where you have requirements like that for, I don't know, Levi, you need to do certain kind of repairs. For nudie jeans, you do something else. So you might have staff that are specifically trained for specific product brands or models or electronics. It might be like you handle tablets, you handle phones, you handle computers, because there's some level of specialized knowledge that is needed there. So in sortation, we're trying to figure out on a high level to which kind of process line this item would go. If you're super specified and you know that I only receive this kind of products, the sortation becomes maybe a bit easier. So that's a big thing. And then it might be something related to the condition of the product. So I might already see that this let's say that the laptop that came in is in 100 pieces, it's broken. It's like there's no way that our process line will be able to do anything with it. So I might just disregard it and recycle it. So you can do this decision without even knowing too much about the brand. Similarly, if it's like, let's say, an outdoor tent, if it's extremely dirty, it was used in Glastonbury, comes back, you look at it and you know that, okay, so before anyone can do anything with it, it needs to go through a wash. So you might do this decision already at sortation. So it's these high-level decisions to figure out where stuff goes and whether there needs to be a pre-phase before going there, for example, like washing.
All right, so now we have the license plate and the initial sortation that can be quite unique already, but the main idea is to have like this high level, which type of line is it going if they are very separate, or if it's going already to the next best use case, or if it needs some kind of washing or something pre-phase like that. And after that, let's say that in this case it's a good item, we want to proceed with the refurbishment, what is the next step?
Sure, and we probably need to revisit the next best use because there's also a little bit of decisions there. After we get to the kind of right process line, so again, what that means is that it's now at a process line in a condition that someone can start working with it. The item likely has some level of declaration, meaning what is it, and some initial condition. It might, for example, with phone refurbishment, it might have consumer attached declaration to it. Like I've said that this is in good condition. So this grading process might start to work against that. So there's a professional grading happening there and independently, and then they might compare and that might affect your cashback or trade-in value or so. But if we put that aside for a while and we assume that all of this is happening without that kind of a value proposition, now I have the item in front of me and my job is to start figuring out what grade is it. And grading guides come from manufacturers, brands, retailers, or if you're kind of operating this internally, you've defined few grading categories. And one of the reasons why you have this is to figure out, is it worthwhile for me to invest how much to this process? Like you might have a estimate that is continuously improved through actual data from the process and actual sales, that how much does it cost, for example, for me to take a grade 4 item and to refurbish it to be grade 1. That of course has some cost to it. I might have to use some spare parts, but then of course you have a margin count into it that from a grade 1 phone you can maybe, or item, you can make a bit more money. So it's this kind of a condition grading process that starts from there. Your overall goal, of course, is to do this analysis that what is needed in order to improve grade, the repair cost of that, and that calculates everything from like cost of washing, cost of spare parts, cost of employee time, and then doing this analysis that to what level should I grade it? Do I just change the screen? Do I start to put a little bit more memory there? Do I kind of start to remanufacture it from the beginning? In most cases, if you're trying to scale your operation, I would say that this is the place where margins are made or lost. And the analysis that you can do there, like how good and granular can you go there? And the things that I mentioned is that like the cost bases are not only the spare parts, it's also the employee time. So this is now starts to be the reason why every item and the overall process and the timestamps kind of that happens there need to be followed on item level, because first you start with an estimate. when you're kind of day zero, you're just saying, okay, I suspect that it might take 20 minutes and these spare parts to push a grade 4 to be grade 1. As you start to actually do it, you track your operational efficiency, and then you start to see what the real costs are, and then you kind of adjust your grading logic, which might then start affecting the decisions on, hey, what should happen to this item now? So that's I think the most interesting part, and that's probably the one where you can make most value based on your knowledge of the item, like your supply of spare parts and all of these things. That's where most value is created.
And I guess one additional variable is also let's say if you're, for example, reselling the item, is also the demand for it, like on different grades, and that's something that can actually change quite a bit. So we've been talking a lot about iPhones, and for example, when there is a new model, the previous models might kind of like start to lose value on
the
as
shelf
they get
value
older.
goes down.
Yeah. So that's something that also needs to be taken into account, that this same phone, if I actually refurbish it to be grade 1, month ago could have been like profitable, but nowadays it's not, and now it's maybe better to do it to grade 2 or 3 and then sell it a little bit cheaper.
Definitely, yeah. So this really goes into the category of whether it's whether the repair is in budget or no. I think before going to the idea that okay, so we now refurbished it and then we're going to put it out to be sold, I think it's worthwhile to figure out, okay, so what happens if our analysis says that it's not worthwhile? Not worthwhile to grade it refurbish it at all. So either it was, and this might have happened already at the sortation, that we defined that this is effectively junk, and it has only residual value that I'm going to talk about. And then it might happen here in the condition grading that a more trained process actually defines that, okay, there is refurbishment potential here, but as we count in the cost of refurbishment, then we actually end up saying that the economics doesn't make sense. Physically we could do it, but the economics do not make sense. So from both of these paths, the item might go to next best use. So figuring out what do we do it. So again, super specific might be that let's send it back to the customer saying, hey, do you want it back, or do you want us to recycle it? Now, that's when the analysis starts to happen that, okay, so even though it might not economically make sense to push this item to be resellable or reusable, the some parts of the kind of spare parts that is attached to it might still make sense. So I might take the battery out. Maybe there's value there. I can use it somewhere else. Maybe the screen is still in good condition. Everything else is just broken due to, I don't know, water damage or whatever. Or with clothes, there's maybe some buttons here that we can use in other. So I can start to figure out, I might have a specialized process for it, or it might happen in the actual process line, but you can start kind of then figuring out next best use, like ripping out all of the spare parts that you might use later. Again, aggregately then improving your margins, because then you don't have to buy those spare parts. You can use it from those, you kind of got it for free. Or it might be material recycling. So if you are vertically integrated as a retailer, maybe it just goes back to your manufacturing where they, turn materials back to fiber and all of that, like material flow optimization. Or it might be that it goes to goodwill, just donating it and all of these things. But it's this analysis and super specific again per product category, per operator, whether this is an aggregated refurbisher, whether it's in-house. This analysis depends a lot on that.
Okay, so the next best use, you can kind of like at any point that you are doing the check, so it can be the initial check, or it can be the grading, or at any time it can kind of like go into the same bucket.
Yeah.
And you're just doing it like on a different level, like initial sortation, you're seeing that it's like bent and cracked and all that. You might be immediately like, okay,
yeah,
we're not able to repair it. And then in the later phase, if there is some, let's say like engineer actually looking inside a phone or something,
yeah,
and then they can say, okay, there is a bunch of water damage, and now it goes to the next best use.
Yeah, and there's these two components. There's the physical analysis and the economical analysis. So sometimes the physical analysis makes sense to start refurbishing it, but the economics do not make sense. Like you said, that the model or such that the end market value has just plummeted. But there's super interesting categories like there's a Finnish company called Kamerastore that refurbishes old film cameras. And some of the film cameras are so rare, it's like collectibles. So yeah, the market might not right now be there, but you might have the foresight and say that this is still a quite rare model, so we will hold on to it as a, not only as spare parts, but because we're going to put it on the shelf because maybe the kind of value is going up as it's becoming retro or vintage or similar. So with these product categories where there are collectibles or collectability, it's a super interesting market, like watches and all of that. That it's like if it might the next best use might be that I still hold on to it and wait a while, and then I push it to the market.
I guess that's also a good example that the example refurbishment flow that we have here is kind of like very simplified version. So you actually have all the spare parts and you might have this storage phase and all of that, and that's probably very unique to all companies.
Definitely, and this I think this is even though it's a small part there in the graph that we have, but this condition grading analysis is probably the one where software can do a lot of heavy lifting with for you. It's probably hard to have one software that does it all, like market analysis and all of that. But I would say that the requirements for your software should be such that there's quite a lot of storage. You can store a lot of data per article level on a timestamped level in order you to do process analysis and in order to can tie that data to other software that are more specialized, for example, pricing, optimization, and so on. So it is probably like commerce in general, I think, is always a little bit of a spaghetti of products. You kind of have to, it's rare that you can run everything in one. You kind of usually have some add-ons or apps that you use and all of that. So I think this is the same thing. You need a system that is highly integratable to other software to do a optimization on that grading phase.
Okay, but on the inventory system, I guess the main point is that you are able to track every item individually.
Yep.
You are able to have timestamp on different phases when it enters here, when it leaves here, and then some ability to input like expenses there, like maintenance cost or spare parts or similar.
Yep, definitely. So it's kind of, yeah, all of that. And maybe the one thing that I would add, it's like that the system that you have needs to acknowledge that you get items back kind of that there's that the moving between phases is not necessarily always a one-way street, but you might in practice have items go like through kind of bouncing around a something like a flow chart that we have here from different phases to another. And if your system assumes that it's kind of a linear progression of like, okay, enter, do something, exit, it rarely is that smooth. So there's probably some circulation between phases there that happens. So you want a system that doesn't force you to run your refurbishment process in one way, because you're likely continuously adjusting that to improve your operational efficiency and margin.
So the flexibility needs to be built into the software, into the system. Yeah. Okay, so now the product has been graded, so now we know if it's physically possible to refurbish it, and then it's all about the economics. So should we, or should it go to the next best use case?
I think that's actually pretty good. Can we? And then the next question is should we, when it comes to kind of that grading. So then let's go to the scenario that we can and we should. So then it's a question that, okay, do we want to push the grading up by repair? Let's say that the repair is in the budget, it makes sense, then let's perform the repair. And after that, it actually goes to kind of probably some kind of quality control in order to kind of understand was the repair done correctly, because you're now dismantling things or similar, or then you have strict brand guidelines, so then someone is kind of looking at the products that do this actually meet the brand guidelines. And then you need to kind of usually re-catalog them or now we kind of start to have an inventory article that we know is of certain grade, and we want to sell it or re-rent it. So in case we want to sell it as refurbished or maybe secondhand, it could have been that at the grading we decided that it's already grade 1, we don't have to do anything with it, we can just sell it as it is, or if I were a secondhand job, we don't do refurbishment, we just give a grade and then sell it as it is. It might go through some kind of a catalogization where the item comes to into a small studio or similar. It's usually a camera pointing at a table. You put the item there, you snap the photo, and it automatically creates a listing for your online store or other channels for it that attaches all of the information that we have about the grade and the history of it. Now, that you don't have to necessarily show all of the inventory information as it is on a catalog level, but you might have some transformation from there. Like, okay, let's take the grading information, let's take some life cycle information, depending on the customers that you have. Like, do they value extremely gradual detail, or do they just want to see that good as new? All right. But yeah, so you do this categorization, you probably take a photo of it, and then create the other information, the price and all of that. The cool thing there is that instead of having a catalog where you have a generic catalog picture for good as new iPhones or good as new bikes, you actually will have a catalog of the actual photos of that bike. So it enables then a lot better purchase experience for end users, because now as they browse your offering online, for example, when they look into photos, they can actually zoom in and look at that specific bike that they're buying. There's a refurbished bike seller or marketplace called Bicycle, B-U-Y, Cycle. And they, I think, do a great job in the fact that when you go look at a bike, they are individual, like actual photos of that actual bike. So I can zoom in, I can see where the scratches are, do I mind those or not? So this is again why that tracking of individual item throughout the flow was so important, because we can start using that as a way of serving our customers better. So then this happens, you have the quality, and then you have the stuff out there, and then it's effectively ready to be pick, pack, shipped once someone interacts with your catalog offering. If it was a rental, because the thing with rentals is that this refurbishment cycle is kind of built in the idea since day zero. You probably skip this catalog phase and taking the images because you are selling it as a service. So you just figure out whether it meets the criteria that you've set for your rental fleet, that can serve its purpose as you wanted. But maybe with rentals, usually the end of life for many rental fleets is that they end up being sold as refurbished. So at the final cycle of a rental item in a fleet might be that then you end up in a situation where you know all of the condition and grading of that item, and you just do the final decision that now it's time to sell it. And you put it out for sales, and then you might attach that image of it, but then you're up and running there.
So in rentals, the refurbishment flow is kind of like built in, and it might be a little bit, let's say, simpler or smaller flow. So for example, bikes, you always check the brakes, you always check the tires, you always check that everything is safe and everything is working. And if it's okay, then you kind of mark it as available for the next rental.
Yeah.
But then on the end of the cycle, you kind of come back into this, let's say, complete refurbishment flow, which includes like a lot of these different phases, and then possibly individualizing it also as like a listing or making it available as individual item for purchase. Or
yeah, and I'd say with rentals, it's actually the kind of listing out your rental item is easy. It can be as easy as just selecting it from your inventory and then creating a listing out of it. The reason for that is that it's kind of continuously going through this refurbishment. So we kind of know all of the information already because then we are inspecting it pretty much after every rental. So if it's a high volume renting, we should be quite in tune of what the condition is here. With rentals, I think the key thing, like this flow has been built into any any rental operation, because depending on the market, you might even have some responsibilities of making sure that it's, safe for the consumers to use. So you usually have this kind of process already built in. It might be that you haven't just documented it or in a digital way, and you're losing out in a lot of the analysis and figuring out operational efficiency, and it becomes you cannot really maximize the optimization on the reselling at the end of the life cycle. But so yeah, rental companies really tend to have these, and in the simplest ways how software that are built for rentals kind of take this into account is that they just have some kind of a maintenance or buffer time. And then on a high level, you've said that after each booking, it takes me an hour to inspect the stuff, because then maybe your process is such that I inspect. If it works, it goes out. If it doesn't, it goes out of fleet. So you cover it with some kind of average time. It might work for small scale operations. I personally believe that, for example, the software that we're now bringing out to the market is that if you do it a little bit more granularly, you get a lot better data on, like, first of all, on how much revenue this is making, how long does it take to actually do these inspection processes, all of the details from those inspection processes, so that at any given moment you can go to your rental inventory, you can kind of see the maintenance history, and you can probably just with the snap of a button turn it into a listing if you want to start selling your rental fleet, instead of then starting to do a heavy lifting manual analysis on what's the condition of my fleet.
So in rentals, it's doing a lot of these like small cycles, and it's also, once again, super important that the inventory is able to see like how many times has it been used, how much maintenance there has been, spare parts used, and kind of bring this one rental item. It's becoming like an asset in your balance sheet that you kind of know exactly, like, this bike has generated this amount of revenue, the utilization rates and all of this, and maybe also at what time is it good time to sell it, so that the resale value is still high enough and enables me to maybe purchase a new item.
Yeah, the questions that you really want to have an answer at any given moment is that, what's the value of my inventory at any given moment? That's kind of dependent on a lot of that information. How profitable my items have been, so taking into account the rental income, but also time spent in keeping those in circulation, and the cost and time of that. So you're kind of doing this analysis because you over time you will acquire items that are not good. They're constantly in repair. You need to know this. You need to kind of figure out that, hey, next time I buy, I'm not going to buy that model or from that specific provider. So it's this kind of, and then on an item level, of course, there's I don't know whether there's an English term, but in Finnish there's this like maanantai-kappale, so a Monday item, so meaning that it was manufactured on a Monday, meaning that someone early in the morning didn't, on a Monday maybe.
Kind of like a bad apple.
Yeah, bad apple, so it didn't get the love and attention that it should have gotten. So you were unfortunate and you got a Monday item. So then it's, then you want to kind of acknowledge these things that in your inventory and know that, okay, I don't aggregate the bad performance of this individual item to all of those. So I wouldn't want to run my rental operation on a level that I just know that 4 out, 1 in general, bikes tend to do good or bad. It might be good enough for, let's say, a small, you have 20 bikes at a beach. That probably, and you're a single entrepreneur or one employee, you have all of the information in your head, you have continuous contextual awareness of how things are going, and you store everything in your head. If you are that individual, you can probably run the business efficiently. I would still elect to save this somewhere in a more scalable way, so I can focus my headspace to other things like marketing or how to grow this operation or how to spend more time with the family without thinking about my inventory. But especially if you start to scale your operation to multi-locations, or you start to have more employees that do not actually have continuously all of the context in their head, it becomes quite important to have a solution that then facilitates all of this.
And I would assume that as humans tend to be not the best with data. There might actually be a lot of surprises even for the single entrepreneur that, hey, I feel like this item is doing well, but then you can actually see the real data that it's actually not performing really well. Or
Yeah, and then and the otherwise also you have these occasional huge performers that you just forget. There's I think a potential category for these are, for example, small add-on pieces. Like if you have like an adapter for something for a car and a trailer, just to kind of to be able to plug it in. That adapter might cost you $50. And you sell it as a additional service for $5 or whatever. But people just do not want to buy a $50 adapter to use that for a day or two or whatever. So they rather pay 5, 10, or even $20 for a $50 item for the convenience of not having to throw it out after the rental. So you might have 50 of those, but they in a year accumulate thousands of revenue. So you might identify these small items that have actually amazing gross margin potential, and if you would just push those a bit more aggressively as add-on sales, as kind of a convenience, quality of life thing, as part of the rental, the kind of service, those might start making a lot of gross margin and cash for your operation. So I think it's also like it's identifying the bad apples, but it's also identifying these silent performers that are doing a lot of nice income for your business.
And also enabling testing these. If you are interested in expanding your business, you can start to do these small things and kind of not keep it in your head, even if you are a single entrepreneur, but just kind of do these little add-on offerings or similar and just have the data available after a month or two. And then you might actually understand that, hey, this is what I should actually be doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think we have now covered pretty much the whole refurbishment flow. Maybe as like a final, if you are able to kind of like walk it through fast and kind of go through everything, I think that would be a really nice recap for our listeners.
So I'll try to do a refurbishment flow in 30 seconds, kind of a thing. So,
it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge. But I would say everything always starts from the aspect that you try to like identify and inspect what is this item or what are these items. Based on that, you do an initial sortation. Where should this item go? Who should start working on it? Or should it already, based on that, I can see that it's garbage, so it should go to a kind of a next best use analysis, where I decide, do I turn it to spare parts? Do I recycle it, or do I donate it, or what do I do with it? In the sortation, I might also decide these high-level things that this needs a quick wash before it can go to refurbishment or grading. After this, we have an item that is ready to go to a grading process. It's clean, it's workable, we know what it is. We can analyze what the grade is and whether it makes sense to spend time, so parts, employee time, some other kind of resources to start to kind of improve the grading of that item. So let's push it from bad condition to good as new. For that, I usually have some kind of software help to figure out if I spend $50 repairing it, do I get $100 in sales price improvement? If that economical equation makes sense, then I continue with the grading. If it doesn't, if I might decide to sell it as is, or then again, throw it to next best use. After this, we should have a graded product that and refurbished product that I'm ready to resell. So in order to do that, I need to turn that item into kind of create a listing or a catalog product page for it. That usually demands some kind of a individualized photo of that item, and then if I've used some kind of inventory system to track all of these, the other information like prices and condition automatically come from that information. And then I have a catalog item or listing in my online store that an end user can browse, and when they buy it, I can pick back and ship it. So that would be kind of it probably took more than 30 seconds, but that's the quick summary.
Yeah, took a little bit more than 30 seconds, but I think that's fine. That was a really nice recap of what type of a refurbishment cycle is in a nutshell. But as discussed, usually it's a little bit more complex, and then you have these own. But I think the main phases are on our example already.
I think the quickest that I can do is that what is it? Can we refurbish it? Should we refurbish it? Then doing it and then selling it again. I'm using your words. Can and should we?
That's really good. That was under 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Very nice. But hey, thank you very much for this. I think this is super valuable for our listeners.
Thank you so much.